He was supposed to run. That's how it usually works. You track the scent signature. You confirm visual. You step out of the car, and the alpha bolts. Pride injured, instincts flaring, ego louder than reason. Then you negotiate from a position of motion. But Orion Hale was standing in the middle of Route 89 at 2 in the morning. A road flare burning at his feet like a small red sun. The desert wind cut sharp and dry across the asphalt, carrying the smell of dust, heated tar, and something faintly metallic. My sedan idled behind me. Headlights framing him in white. He didn't shield his eyes. Didn't shift his weight. Just stood there. I adjusted my cufflinks out of habit. Yes, I was wearing a charcoal suit in the middle of northern Arizona. No, I was not overheated. I prepare for meetings. That's what this is. A meeting with possible claws. I stepped out of the car and closed the door with deliberate calm. The air changed immediately. You can't explain alpha presence to humans without sounding dramatic. It's not a smell, not exactly. It's pressure, like the atmosphere before a storm. It presses against your ribcage and tests whether you're going to fold. I don't fold. Orion Hale, I called, voice steady. You're a long way from home. He tilted his head slightly. Dark hair pulled back, coat snapping once in the wind. Even from 30 yards away, I could see the control in him. No visible agitation, no restless pacing, no flexing hands itching for violence. He wasn't radiating dominance. He was containing it. That was new. You're later than expected, he said. His voice carried easily across the road. Deep. Even. Not raised. I stopped for coffee, I replied. You'd be surprised how many high-speed pursuits are prevented by caffeine. A corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. I walked closer. Close enough now to see the flare light painting his face red and shadowed. 32, according to his file. Former Pac Alpha candidate. Marked unstable after repeated refusal to submit to leadership directives. Translation, difficult. I stopped 10 feet away. A respectful distance. Not fear. Protocol. Neil Carter, I said. Western Region Return Specialist. I know who you are, Orion replied. That surprised me more than the flare. Oh? You talk them down. You don't break bones unless you have to. A beat. They send you when they want cooperation. I appreciate the review, I said. I aim for 5 stars. The wind picked up again. Colder this time. I felt it through the fabric of my suit. My fingers tingled slightly, but I kept my hands loose at my sides. He studied me. Not predatory. Assessing. You're not afraid, he observed. Of you? I shrugged lightly. No, that was true. Fear would spike my pulse, tighten my scent. I monitor these things. I'm a beta, yes. But I was trained to hold my ground in a room full of alphas who think gravity bends for them. What I felt wasn't fear. It was curiosity. You're supposed to run, I said. Makes my job easier. I was curious, Orion replied. What kind of man they'd send? And? His gaze flicked briefly to my hands. You're shaking. I looked down. Damn. The cold had finally worked its way into my fingers. It's 43 degrees, I said dryly. You're the one standing over open flame like a gothic camp counselor. That did it. A faint, real smile this time. The pressure in the air shifted. Not gone, but softened. I'm not going back, he said. There it was. The predictable line. That's rarely your decision, I answered. It can be. His eyes sharpened slightly. If you listen. I exhaled slowly, measuring him. Fine, I said. Talk. He stepped off the flare, crushing it under his boot. The red glow dimmed, leaving only my headlights and the wide, indifferent sky. They told you I'm unstable, he said. You refused orders. I refused to disappear. The words landed wrong in my chest. Not dramatic, not shouted. Just stated. I kept my voice neutral. Your pack filed the report. My pack is gone. The wind moved between us again, carrying something under his scent, not aggression. Not challenge. Grief. Explain, I said. He met my eyes fully now. Understand why I left, Orion said quietly. If you still believe I should return, I'll go willingly. A pause. No posturing. No threat. Just an offer. I should have refused. Protocol says, avoid extended exposure. Maintain control of timeline. Minimize narrative influence from the subject. Instead, I found myself calculating risk. He could have run. He didn't. He could be attacking. He wasn't. 48 hours wouldn't compromise containment. 48 hours might clarify inconsistencies in his file. I'll give you 2 days, I said finally. 48 hours. After that, if I'm not convinced, you walk in with me. His eyes searched mine for something. Weakness, maybe. He wouldn't find it. Agreed, he said. I turned toward my car. Behind me, Orion fell into step without being told. The desert stretched wide and silent around us. For the first time in my career, I wasn't sure whether I was escorting a fugitive or following him into something that was already bigger than both of us. The desert looks endless at night. Headlights carve out a narrow tunnel through blackness, and everything beyond it feels theoretical. Orion sat in the passenger seat of my sedan like he'd always belonged there. Posture relaxed, one arm resting on the window frame, watching the dark slide by. Most alphas fidget when confined. He didn't. I kept my eyes on the road. You're very calm for someone technically under escort, I said. You're very calm for someone driving a fugitive, he replied. Alleged fugitive. A pause. Explain it to me, he said. The version they trained you to recite. I almost smiled. The clean version? Yes. I adjusted the heater up a notch. My hands had finally stopped trembling, though I suspected that had less to do with temperature and more to do with adrenaline settling. The return protocol, I began, voice measured, exists to stabilize pack structure. When a wolf leaves without formal separation, it destabilizes hierarchy. Instinct responds poorly to uncertainty. That's a polite way to say alphas don't like losing control, Orion said. That's a simplistic way to say society doesn't survive chaos. He didn't interrupt again, so I continued. Runaways are flagged as potentially unstable. Emotional volatility. Risk of territorial conflict. We retrieve them and assess whether reintegration is possible. And, if it's not? We rehabilitate. The word sounded crisp. Professional. He turned his head slightly toward me. Define that. Counseling. Behavioral recalibration. Temporary containment if necessary. Containment, he repeated softly. I kept my eyes forward. Most return voluntarily once they understand the consequences of staying rogue. And the ones who don't? I exhaled slowly through my nose. There are escalation tiers. That was as much as the handbook required. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the steady hum of tires on asphalt. After a moment he asked, "Who runs it?" "Western Operations?" I said. "Marcus Vane." "Your boss?" "Yes." Marcus Vane had a voice that could sell serenity to a hurricane. 45. Beta. Impeccable record. He believed in structure the way some people believe in religion. I'd watched him de-escalate a territorial standoff with nothing but measured phrasing and a hand on the right shoulder. Order is mercy, he liked to say. Marcus thinks instability spreads, I added. He believes intervening early prevents bloodshed. And you? Orion asked. I believe in preventing bloodshed. That part was true. I don't hunt. I negotiate. I talk wolves down from cliffs. Literal and metaphorical. I've had alphas twice my size trembling under the weight of decisions they didn't understand how to make. I gave them exits that preserved dignity. I have always been good at that. Orion watched the passing darkness for a long time. Then he asked quietly, "How many of them did you see again after?" The question landed wrong. What? The ones you brought back. He didn't look at me now. How many did you see again after? I opened my mouth automatically. The answer should have been easy. Dozens of successful reintegrations. Positive outcomes. Stabilized packs. That's what the reports say. But I tried to picture faces. Mason Ridge. Volatile, defensive. Returned without incident. Darla Keene. Frightened, pregnant. Requested reassignment. I remembered escorting them into facilities. I remembered paperwork. I did not remember seeing them later. They don't usually request follow-up contact, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. The road curved gently. My grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. They're monitored internally, I replied. By you? No. Another pause. The desert outside felt less empty now. More watchful. How many, Neil? He asked again. For the first time since I'd stepped out of my car tonight, I didn't have a clean answer ready. And that bothered me far more than the alpha sitting beside me. The mountains rose out of the desert like something unfinished. Route 87 twisted upward into narrow switchbacks, guardrails thin, and mostly symbolic. The kind of road where you trust your brakes more than fate. Dawn was still an hour away. The sky held that deep indigo before morning. Not night, not day. Suspended. Orion had been quiet since his question. How many did you see again after? I'd deflected. Not answered. That silence was still sitting between us when the headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Fast. Too fast for this stretch of road. I checked the clock. 3:12 a.m. No scheduled escort. No check-in request from command. No notification of tier support. The SUV behind us was matte black. No insignia. That yours? Orion asked casually. No, I said. The vehicle closed distance aggressively, engine roaring as it took the curve too sharply. I felt my jaw tighten. Maybe they sent a babysitter, Orion offered. Babysitters don't tailgate at 80 on mountain roads. The SUV swerved left, attempting to overtake us on a blind turn. That's when I saw it. The passenger window lowered halfway. Metal glinted. Down. I snapped. The first shot shattered my rear windshield. Glass exploded inward in a glittering wave. I ducked instinctively, one hand yanking the wheel right to avoid the edge of the guardrail. That was not escort protocol. Escort units signal first. Identify. Secure perimeter. They don't shoot through civilian vehicles. The SUV clipped our rear bumper as it forced past us. The impact jerked the sedan sideways. Tires screamed against asphalt. I fought the spin, breath sharp in my throat. A second shot punched through the driver's side window. Sniper. Professional. Get off the road, Orion said, already unbuckling. Don't tell me how to drive. Get off. He was right. I cut the wheel hard and aimed for the gravel shoulder just beyond the next bend. The car skidded violently, fishtailed, then slammed into a shallow ditch. Airbags didn't deploy. Thank God. Before I could fully register whether I was bleeding, Orion's door was already open. Stay down, he ordered. That would have annoyed me more if the third shot hadn't struck exactly where my head had been seconds earlier. Orion moved differently than I expected. Not wild. Not feral. Precise. He used the terrain, boulders, slope, shadow, advancing low and fast toward the SUV now parked sideways across the road. Another figure emerged from behind it, rifle raised. Orion closed the distance in a blur of controlled violence. No roaring. No snarling. He disarmed the shooter with brutal efficiency. Wrist twist, shoulder impact, weapon skidding across pavement. The man hit the ground hard but alive. The second operative charged from behind the vehicle. I pushed my door open and grabbed the emergency flare from the trunk compartment. Improvised weapons are a negotiation strategy. Left. I shouted. Orion pivoted just as the attacker lunged. I hurled the flare. It struck the man's chest, bright red sparks exploding across tactical fabric. He staggered back instinctively, giving Orion the opening to sweep his legs out and slam him to asphalt. Both men were breathing. Both were unconscious. Neither was dead. Orion stood over them, chest rising slowly, eyes scanning the dark. He could have killed them. Instead, he turned toward the ditch. Toward me. He had a clear escape route, mountain forest behind him. No vehicle tracking on him yet. Freedom 10 seconds away. He hesitated. Then he ran back down the slope. I was half out of the car when he reached me. You're terrible at dying, Orion said, grabbing my arm and hauling me upright. I tried to disappoint, I answered, breathless. His grip tightened briefly, checking, assessing damage. You hit? Just my pride. Headlights flared again in the distance. More incoming. I looked up at him. This wasn't retrieval support, I said quietly. No, Orion replied. He didn't need to finish the thought. This was termination. And if they were willing to shoot through my windshield to get to him, I was no longer just an escort. I was collateral. The motel sign buzzed like it was arguing with itself. VAC NCY. The A flickered in and out, bathing the cracked parking lot in unstable pink light. Room 12 smelled like old carpet and lemon disinfectant trying too hard. 2 narrow beds. 1 lamp with a shade slightly tilted. A television bolted to the dresser like it expected violence. I locked the door, slid the chain across, then checked the window twice. Comforting, Orion said mildly, leaning against the wall near the door. You were just shot at, I replied. This is what comfort looks like. He didn't argue. We'd abandoned my sedan 2 miles back after confirming it wouldn't survive another incline. I'd wiped what I could and pulled the tracking module from beneath the dashboard. It wasn't transmitting when I smashed it against a rock. That part unsettled me more than the gunfire. If command wasn't tracking me, someone else was. I set my laptop on the small desk and opened the secure access portal. Login denied. I frowned and tried again, routing through a secondary credential path. Access restricted. Interesting, I muttered. Good interesting? Orion asked. Define good. I pulled up the archive registry manually. My clearance level had been adjusted, not revoked, just lowered. Temporary administrative downgrade. That was Marcus's style. Soft corrections. Something wrong? Orion asked. No, I said automatically. He gave me a look that made it clear he did not believe me. I tried a specific file. Mason Ridge. File exists. Access denied. Darla Keene. Access denied. A cold sensation slid slowly under my skin. Your pack, I said without looking at him. When were they processed? 6 months ago. Names. He listed them quietly. 8 wolves. 3 alphas. 2 betas. 3 omegas. I typed each one. File exists. Access restricted. All 8. My throat tightened. That doesn't prove anything, I said, mostly to myself. Tiered access happens during internal reviews. Internal reviews of what? Orion asked. I didn't answer. He crossed the room slowly and sat on the edge of the second bed. The mattress springs creaked under his weight. They came at night, he said. I stopped typing. Black vans, he continued. No pack insignia. Said it was a stabilization audit. Temporary relocation for assessment. Relocation is standard if leadership disputes escalate. They didn't escalate, he said sharply. Not loud. Just sharper. We questioned resource allocation, land rights, why certain packs were forced to surrender territory. I turned slowly toward him. You challenged regional directives. We asked for transparency. I held his gaze. And then? They were returned. The word landed heavy between us. To a central facility, he continued. I was away negotiating with another pack. By the time I got back, the houses were empty. My mind supplied alternatives automatically. Voluntary transfer, reassignment, strategic redistribution. Did you receive confirmation of integration? I asked. He laughed once, humorless. I received a message from your office, thanking us for our cooperation. The neon sign outside flickered again, washing the room briefly in pink. I stared at my screen. 8 restricted files. Then, I opened the incident report from tonight. No escort unit logged. No field support authorized. No termination order visible. That meant either an off-record operation, or I was no longer looped into the real one. You think they're dead? I said quietly. I think they never made it back, Orion replied. My chest felt tight. I've built a career on believing I was preventing bloodshed. On believing that intervention was mercy. I pictured Mason Ridge walking through facility doors. I pictured Darla Keene clutching her stomach. I had never followed up. I never needed to. Protocol doesn't require closure. Something inside me shifted, not breaking yet, but cracking. A hairline fracture running through assumptions I had never thought to question. You're shaking again, Orion observed softly. I looked down. Not from cold this time. I closed the laptop. They tried to kill you, I said. They tried to kill us, he corrected. Silence stretched. Finally, I stood and unholstered my sidearm, checking the magazine with practiced precision. I placed it on the nightstand. Get some rest, I said. You still think you're bringing me in? I hesitated. I think, I said carefully, that I need more information. He nodded once. We turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, punctuated only by the flicker of neon through thin curtains. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 10 years of retrieval work, I slept with my gun in my hand. Not to guard a fugitive, but to guard myself from the system I'd sworn to serve. The communication station sat 30 miles off the highway, disguised as a rural weather monitoring facility. That was the official label. In reality, it was one of our quieter data hubs. Minimal foot traffic, low oversight, excellent for pretending nothing questionable ever passed through it. I'd used it before. Never like this. Orion waited in the tree line while I approached alone. He didn't argue. We both understood optics. If this was still salvageable through internal channels, I needed to look like I was still playing by the rules. The door buzzed after my third knock. Ellison Grant opened it with a laptop tucked under one arm, and a stylus clenched between her teeth. "You look terrible," she said immediately. "Good morning to you too." Ellie was an Omega in her late 20s, sharp-eyed and chronically caffeinated. The system had fast-tracked her after she built a predictive pack movement algorithm at 23. She owed her career to the program. Everyone knew it. She also owed me a favor. "You weren't scheduled," she said, stepping aside. "And your access just got weird." I noticed. Inside, the station hummed with quiet machinery. Server racks blinked in disciplined rows. It smelled faintly of dust and ozone. Ellie moved quickly to her console, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Your clearance was downgraded at 241, she said. "Temporary administrative adjustment." "By whom?" "Marcus Vane." "That tracked." "What else?" She hesitated. "That depends," she said carefully. "Are we pretending this is routine?" "No." Her shoulders tightened. She typed something else. A hidden access window opened. Code scrolled. "You didn't get this from me," she muttered. "I rarely do." She shot me a quick glare and then pulled up a shadow archive. Data not visible through standard retrieval portals. "There's a classification flag tied to multiple return cases," she said. "It's not public tiering. It's separate. Defined separate." She swallowed. "Tier 3. My pulse ticked once in my throat. "Tier 3. What?" She turned the screen toward me. "Tier 3 disposal authorization." The words sat there in sterile black font. "That's not a rehabilitation term," I said automatically. "No," Ellie agreed, voice tight. "It's not." She pulled up cross-references. Mason Ridge. Darla Keene. 8 members of Orion Hale's pack. All marked Tier 3. Disposition, closed. Closed. "That's an administrative shorthand," I said. "Closed can mean transfer, reassignment, sealed relocation." "It can?" Ellie interrupted quietly. "But not under Tier 3. She opened a deeper log. The authorization chain included off-record transport units, restricted facility designation, no reintegration tracking. My mouth felt dry. "There's more," she said reluctantly. "A secondary flag. On Orion." She nodded. "Tier 3. Pending." That part didn't surprise me. "What else?" I asked. She hesitated longer this time. "You." The screen refreshed. "Neil Carter. Post-knowledge liability. Conditional Tier 3 authorization if exposure confirmed." For a moment the room seemed too bright. "That's not real," I said. Ellie's hands were shaking slightly now. "It's very real." I stared at the words. Tier 3 disposal. I've spent a decade talking wolves down from fear. I've told them the system was built to protect them. This had to be a misinterpretation. "This is a misinterpretation," I repeated. Ellie didn't argue. But she didn't agree either. And somewhere in the quiet hum of servers, something inside me cracked a little wider. Orion didn't say anything when I told him. Not at first. He listened to the full explanation. Tier 3, shadow authorization, my name flagged beneath his, without interrupting. His face remained unreadable, which was somehow worse than anger. "So," he said finally, as we drove east toward what used to be his pack's land. "Now you've seen it." "I've seen a classification," I replied. "I haven't seen bodies." "That's your comfort threshold?" "It's my evidence threshold." The road narrowed as we approached the old territory boundary. The forest thickened, pines crowding closer to the shoulder. A rusted wooden sign lay half-collapsed in the grass, "Hale Pack, private land." The letters had been claw-marked through. I parked 100 yards out. The air felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not active. Abandoned. We walked in silence. The first house had its front door hanging crooked on one hinge. Curtains stirred through broken windows. A swing set creaked faintly in the wind. Metal rubbing against metal in a rhythm that scraped against my nerves. There's a specific smell to old blood. It's faint once dried. Metallic. Dusty. It lingered here. "You didn't clean," I said quietly. "We weren't allowed back." I crouched near the doorway, fingers brushing along the wood floor. Scuff marks. Drag patterns. Not chaotic, controlled. Organized extraction. "Not a fight," I murmured. "A sweep?" "Yes." We moved house to house. Empty beds. Cupboards half full. A child's drawing taped to a refrigerator. A wolf with a crown. I felt something in my throat tighten unexpectedly. They said it was temporary relocation, Orion said behind me. Evaluation. Cooling off period. And no one returned. No. A branch snapped somewhere to our left. Orion's head turned instantly, posture shifting. Not aggressive, but alert. I followed the sound toward the edge of the property. An older man stood there, leaning heavily on a cane. Beta. Late 60s, maybe older. His scent was faint and weathered, like paper left in the sun. You shouldn't be here, he said. We're not staying, I replied carefully. We're looking for information. He looked at Orion for a long moment. I remember you, he said. Orion nodded once. Respectful. They came fast, the older Beta continued. Middle of the night, black vans, no insignia. My stomach dropped slightly. Federal? I asked. He shook his head. No markings. No pack colors. They moved like military. Resistance? I asked. A little, he said. But not much. They told us it was sanctioned. By whom, he didn't say. They took 8 that night, he added quietly. Said they'd be returned after assessment. And after? Orion asked. The older man looked away. We never saw them again. The wind moved through the trees again, carrying the scent of pine and something older beneath it. How long ago? I asked. 6 months, he replied. I tried to file a complaint. Was told the case was closed. Closed. I felt it then. Not just suspicion. Guilt. Mason Ridge. Darla Keene. 8 wolves here. Countless others I had personally escorted into temporary relocation. I'd believed the paperwork. I'd believed Marcus. Order is mercy. But mercy doesn't erase neighborhoods. It doesn't leave children's drawings on refrigerators. You help them, the older Beta said suddenly, looking directly at me. You're one of the ones who talks them into going quietly. I didn't deny it. They trusted you, he added. The words hit harder than any accusation. I turned slightly, looking back at the empty houses. The broken glass catching light. The silence pressing in. Orion stood a few steps away, watching me. Not triumphant, not vindicated. Just steady. You didn't know, he said quietly. That doesn't help, I replied. Because ignorance, I was realizing, doesn't undo damage. And somewhere between the cracked windows and the metallic scent in the air, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. I wasn't just investigating a flawed system. I was standing in the aftermath of it. And I had been one of its most persuasive tools. We didn't hear them. That was the first mistake. The second was assuming the system would hesitate. We were halfway down the service road leading out of Orion's former territory, when the trees shifted wrong. Not wind. Movement. 3, Orion said quietly. I had already counted 2. The third emerged behind us, cutting off retreat. No insignia. Tactical black. Efficient spacing. This wasn't intimidation. This was retrieval. Or containment. Alive? I asked. If possible, Orion replied. I almost smiled. You're getting sentimental. They're following orders, he said. Like you were. That landed. The first attacker lunged without warning. Fast, low, aiming to tackle Orion's legs. Orion pivoted smoothly, redirecting momentum instead of crushing him. The man hit the dirt hard but breathing. The second came for me. That surprised me less than it should have. A Beta in a suit is easier prey. He swung for my ribs. I blocked, stepped inside his reach, drove my elbow into his. Training, not instinct. I've never relied on strength. I rely on leverage. He shoved back hard enough to stagger me. And then, it hit. The pressure. Full alpha presence. Sudden and massive. Orion had released it. The air thickened. Lungs compressing under invisible weight. My attacker faltered mid-step, instincts recoiling against dominance. So did I. For half a second my focus splintered. Not fear, just physiology responding to something older than logic. Orion saw it. I watched the moment he realized it was affecting me too. And then, it stopped. Not gone. Lowered. He pulled it back deliberately, compressing his aura into something tight and controlled. The atmospheric pressure eased. My breathing steadied. He chose not to overpower the field. He chose me. That realization cut through the adrenaline cleanly. Left, I said, clearer now. He trusted it. Orion shifted toward the third operative, just as the man drew a short blade. I moved in tandem, kicking the weapon out of reach while Orion disarmed him with brutal efficiency. The second attacker tried to recover. I hooked his ankle, dropping him flat. Orion pinned him with a knee, firm but not lethal. We moved, like we'd rehearsed it. No shouted dominance, no competition for control. Just rhythm. The first operative scrambled up, attempting retreat. Orion could have chased. He didn't. He let him run. The forest fell quiet again except for our breathing. 3 men down. All alive. Orion stood slowly, scanning the tree line. The subtle hum of restrained power lingered around him, present but contained. I felt it differently now. Not as a challenge. As discipline. You didn't have to lower it, I said. He looked at me, understanding what I meant immediately. Yes, I did. No, I replied. It would have ended faster. And compromised you, he said calmly. That was true. Under full alpha pressure, even trained betas lose reaction time. Not collapse, but delay. Instinct diverts attention. He had adjusted. For me. You're terrible at dominance theatrics, I said dryly. I'm selective, he answered. There was no touch, no dramatic pause. But something shifted. Not hunter and target, not escort and fugitive. Something closer to equilibrium. Equal ground isn't given in our world. It's chosen. And on that narrow forest road, with 3 unconscious operatives behind us, and the system closing in, Orion chose it. The dispatcher station had been decommissioned 3 years ago. That was the official story. In reality, it had been repurposed as a relay node for encrypted internal traffic, far enough from major hubs to avoid scrutiny, close enough to route tier operations without delay. I knew the access point. That knowledge felt different now. Orion stayed near the doorway while I pried open the rusted maintenance panel along the interior wall. Dust coated everything. The air smelled stale, metallic, abandoned infrastructure pretending it wasn't still alive. You're sure about this? He asked. No, I said honestly. But I'm sure about something else. What? If Tier 3 exists, this is where it breathes. The hidden port blinked faintly when I connected my drive. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the system recognized my biometric key. Access limited. I exhaled slowly. Let's see what limited means. I rerouted through an old internal audit path. Something Marcus once showed me as a demonstration of oversight transparency. Irony has teeth. The interface shifted. Shadow directory opened. My pulse began to climb. There it was. Tier 3, disposal authorization. Not relocation. Not rehabilitation. Disposal. I felt Orion step closer behind me, not touching, just there. Read it, he said quietly. I scrolled. Operational directive, behavioral noncompliance, risk classification, structural destabilization, resolution, permanent neutralization. Names filled the list. Mason Ridge, Darla Keen. 8 members of the Hale Pack. Disposition, executed. The word was clinical. I stared at it. Executed. For a moment, I couldn't hear anything except my own breathing. I negotiated Mason down from tearing apart his own beta, I said distantly. He cried in my car. Orion didn't respond. He didn't need to. I kept scrolling. More names. More closed files. Dozens. The neat efficiency of it made something inside me recoil harder than the gunfire had. Orion Hale, I said quietly. His file opened automatically. Tier 3. Pending. Field elimination authorized upon containment confirmation. He read it over my shoulder. No visible reaction. Then, another tab expanded beneath it. Post-knowledge liability protocol. My name. Neil Carter. Conditional Tier 3 activation if exposure confirmed. The room felt suddenly too small. Exposure confirmed, Orion said softly. I swallowed. Marcus's digital signature marked the authorization chain. Marcus Vane. 45. Calm voice. Order is mercy. He had signed my potential execution. Why? I heard myself ask. Because you're good at your job, Orion replied. That's not. You talk people into trusting the system. The words hit with brutal clarity. They trusted me. And I delivered them. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. I had believed I was preventing violence. Instead, I had streamlined it. You could still walk away, Orion said. I let out a hollow laugh. They're not letting me walk anywhere. Not with me, he corrected. There it was again. Choice. The system had already made one about me. Filed. Authorized. Quietly prepared. And I had never even seen it coming. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. Paperwork. Signature. Closed. I disconnected the drive slowly, hands steadier than I felt. They used me, I said. Yes. I believed in them. I know. I turned to face him fully for the first time since we entered. I built my entire career on the assumption that we were the ethical alternative to pack violence. And now? I looked back at the list one last time. Now I understood why no one had ever called me afterward. Now I understood why follow-ups were discouraged. Now I understood why Marcus always said closure wasn't necessary. Closure leaves no witnesses. They're not containing instability, I said quietly. They're removing inconvenience. The fluorescent light above us flickered once. I shut the terminal down. For the first time in my professional life, I didn't feel conflicted. I felt clear. They signed my disposal, I said. Orion met my eyes. And they tried to kill me, he replied. I nodded once. The betrayal burned, but beneath it something colder settled into place. Resolution. They don't get to close this file, I said. And for the first time since that flare burned on the highway, I wasn't escorting a fugitive. I was preparing to dismantle a system. My phone rang 15 minutes after we left the dispatcher station. Unknown number. That meant internal routing. I already knew who it was. Orion glanced at the screen and then at me. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. I answered. Neil, Marcus Vane said, his voice warm and even, like we were discussing quarterly projections instead of attempted executions. I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy, I replied. I noticed. No accusation, just observation. We pulled over along a stretch of abandoned service road. Pine trees pressed in close. Orion stepped a few feet away, but stayed within earshot. You weren't authorized for extended engagement, Marcus continued gently. The situation escalated. That's one way to describe it. A pause. I'm going to simplify this for you, Marcus said. You've done enough. Bring him in. There it was. The clean directive. The one that pretends nothing has shifted. He's flagged Tier 3, I said. Yes. You signed it. Another pause. Shorter this time. Yes. The honesty landed harder than denial would have. On what grounds? I asked. Behavioral destabilization risk, Marcus replied smoothly. He's an alpha with influence, Neil. Influence without alignment is a threat. To whom? To order. There it was again. Order is mercy. I could hear it between his syllables. You trained me, I said. You told me our work prevented unnecessary bloodshed. It does. No, I replied quietly. It relocates it. The silence stretched. Then Marcus shifted tone slightly, not harsher, just firmer. You accessed material outside your clearance. Yes. That complicates things. For whom? For you. I closed my eyes briefly. You've been flagged, he said calmly. Post-knowledge liability. I'd prefer not to activate that clause. There it was. Professional courtesy. You're giving me a chance, I said. I'm giving you an exit, Marcus corrected. Bring him in. Step away from this. You can still retain your position. My position. My career. My carefully constructed belief that I was on the right side of power. I looked at Orion standing in the trees. Steady, waiting, not listening in, not interfering. 6 months ago, I would have complied. 6 days ago, I would have negotiated. Tonight, I had seen the list. You know what they wrote next to my name? I asked. Marcus didn't answer. They were ready to dispose of me, I continued. You were ready. You compromised operational integrity, he said quietly. The system cannot tolerate that. The system murdered civilians. They were destabilizing factors. They trusted me. They were wolves, Marcus replied. And there it was. The fracture. Not between alpha and beta. Between philosophy and humanity. You've done enough, he repeated softly. Bring him in. I understood then. If I complied, Orion would disappear. If I refused, so would I. This was the end of my career. The clean version had no place for what I now knew. I won't, I said. Silence. Then Marcus exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, Neil. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. Orion walked back toward me. Well? He asked. They offered me my job back, I said. And? I looked down at the device in my hand. Then at the forest. Then at him. I declined. The transmitter was embedded in the lining of my jacket. Standard issue. Undetectable, unless you knew where to look. I had helped design the placement protocol myself. Irony, apparently, has an excellent memory. We stood beside the car under a gray, early morning sky. The forest was quiet, in that cautious way that comes after disturbance. No birds yet. No wind. I removed the jacket slowly. For a moment, I hesitated. That small device represented 10 years of work. Negotiations. De-escalations. Late-night calls from panicked pack leaders who didn't know how to prevent violence without surrendering authority. I had believed in it. Orion watched without speaking. I took a knife from the glove compartment and sliced through the inner seam. The fabric parted easily. The transmitter slid into my palm, small, matte black, no bigger than a coin. It pulsed once. Connected. Waiting. They'll know, Orion said. They already do. I set the device on the hood of the car and crushed it with the butt of my sidearm. Once. Twice. Plastic splintered. Circuit board exposed. The signal cut. Silence. It was surprisingly loud. You're choosing exile, Orion said quietly. The word echoed longer than it should have. Exile meant no clearance. No salary. No legal protection. No institutional shield between me and anyone who decided I was inconvenient. It meant being exactly what I used to retrieve. Rogue. I'm choosing truth, I replied. He studied me carefully. Truth doesn't pay well. I've been overpaid. A corner of his mouth moved slightly. I picked up the broken transmitter and tossed it into the dirt. It landed face down. Useless. For a moment, I felt the absence. No subtle vibration at my spine. No background awareness of being monitored. No safety net. Just air. And choice. They'll escalate, Orion said. They already tried. You can still leave, he added. Disappear. I won't stop you. I met his gaze. That's generous. It's realistic. He wasn't wrong. I could vanish. Use old contacts. Change names. Walk away before the system closed in fully. But that would mean accepting what I'd seen. Accepting that the list stayed hidden. Accepting that Mason Darla, 8 wolves from a broken territory, remained classified as necessary losses. I buttoned my torn jacket back together as best I could. I spent 10 years telling people the system protected them, I said. I don't get to disappear when it doesn't. Orion's eyes softened. Not dominance, not pity. Recognition. All right, he said simply. The forest felt wider now. Not safer. Just honest. For the first time in my life I wasn't carrying a badge. I was carrying responsibility. And that weighed more. The facility didn't look like a prison. That was the first thing that made it worse. It sat in a stretch of industrial land 40 miles outside Phoenix, labeled as a behavioral reintegration research annex. Clean signage. Clean parking lot. No barbed wire. Just white walls. White enough to suggest purity. Orion and I watched from the tree line as a transport van entered through the side gate. Black. Unmarked. Shift changes at 4:30, I said quietly. Security rotation every 6 hours. Minimal external patrol because the location is classified. You helped design that? Orion asked. Yes. He didn't comment. We approached from the drainage culvert on the east side. I still had access to older override codes, revoked now, technically, but internal systems lag behind personnel updates. We slipped through a maintenance door just before dawn. Inside, the air was cold and sterile. The lighting was bright, clinical. No windows. White corridors. Polished floors. Metal doors evenly spaced with biometric locks. The silence wasn't empty. It was controlled. This is where they're processed? Orion asked quietly. Yes. The word tasted different now. We moved carefully, staying within camera blind spots I had once mapped for efficiency testing. I avoided eye contact with the wall-mounted lenses. There were no screams. No obvious signs of violence. Just quiet. We reached the administrative wing first. A glass-walled office overlooked the main corridor. I used an old supervisor credential, still active for audit review, and the door clicked open. Inside, everything was immaculate. Neatly arranged files. Digital terminals. A framed statement on the wall. Stability preserves survival. Marcus's handwriting beneath it. I moved to the central console and began pulling internal logs. Authorization chains. Transfer records. Tier 3 confirmations. Orion stood watch at the door. Make it fast, he said. I intend to. The deeper archive required dual clearance. I bypassed it using the temporary key Ellie had slipped into my drive before I left the station. The screen flickered. Then opened. Video archive. My stomach tightened. I clicked one. A holding room. White walls. Stainless steel restraint chair. Mason Ridge sat in it. Wrists secured but posture upright. His eyes were red, not from rage. From something else. Fear. An operative spoke calmly off camera. Final compliance confirmation? Mason looked straight ahead. I trusted you, he said. The recording cut. My hands went cold. Next, Orion said quietly. I clicked another file. Darla Keene. 7 months pregnant. Standing, not restrained. 2 guards behind her. Temporary relocation? She asked. No answer. The video cut before anything explicit happened. But the disposition file beneath it was clear. Tier 3, executed. I swallowed. Documents, Orion said. I pulled transfer manifests. Internal memos. Budget reallocations tied to resource stabilization. Language so clean it almost erased the human cost. I downloaded everything onto the drive. Then something else caught my eye. An internal memo from Marcus Vane. Subject, program integrity. Increased scrutiny requires decisive resolution of destabilizing factors. Tier 3 implementation must remain off record to preserve structural confidence. Structural confidence. That's what we were protecting. Not people. Perception. Footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor. Shift change. We have to move, Orion said. One more thing. I accessed the personnel index. 3 active tier, 3 pending cases. 2 alphas. 1 beta. The beta's file opened. Age 26. Filed for pack separation due to ideological conflict. No violence record. Tier 3 recommended. I copied that too. The system wasn't just removing powerful alphas. It was removing inconvenient voices. We slipped out the way we came. No alarms. No confrontation, which made it worse. The facility continued functioning behind us, as if nothing had shifted. Because to them, nothing had. But in my pocket was enough data to fracture structural confidence permanently. I stopped once we reached the outer fence. The building gleamed under the rising sun. So clean, so quiet. I had walked wolves into this place, believing they would walk out again. They built it to look humane, Orion said. Yes. And you helped? I know. The truth wasn't a dramatic revelation anymore. It was a weight. I looked at the white walls one last time. They think this keeps the world stable, I said. And does it? Orion asked. I thought about the empty houses. The list. The videos. No, I said. It just keeps it obedient. We didn't have to go looking for him. Marcus came to us. The message arrived through an encrypted broadcast channel I'd used for emergency negotiations years ago. Location attached. 1 hour. No units. He was either confident or tired. The meeting point was an abandoned civic hall outside the city, all stone columns and faded banners. Neutral ground. Symbolic. Orion stayed outside in the shadow of a broken archway while I walked in alone. Marcus stood near the center of the empty hall, hands clasped behind his back. Impeccable as always. Gray suit. Polished shoes. No visible weapon. He looked exactly like the man who had once told me that leadership required moral compromise. Kneel, he said softly. Marcus. No raised voices. No dramatics. He studied my face for a long moment. You look different, he said. I've read the list. His jaw tightened, just slightly. I hoped you wouldn't. You authorized executions. I authorized removals, he corrected calmly. That's a generous synonym. He didn't react to the edge in my voice. You've seen what unstable alphas can do, Marcus said. Territorial wars. Civilian casualties. Pack fractures that ripple across regions. I've seen fear, I replied. I've seen wolves asking for autonomy. And autonomy without structure leads to collapse. Collapse of what? I demanded. Hierarchy? Stability, he said firmly. There it was again. The word he worshipped. You think you're protecting society, I said. I am. By killing dissenters? By preventing escalation before it begins. I stared at him. You executed a pregnant Omega. A flicker crossed his expression, not guilt. Calculation. She was tied to a destabilizing faction. She filed for separation. She was aligned with an alpha advocating territorial defiance. She was 26. Marcus exhaled slowly. You're emotional, he said. That's understandable. Exposure to operational depth can be disorienting. I'm not disoriented, I replied quietly. I'm done being useful. He took a step closer. You were one of our best, he said. You de-escalated volatile situations without bloodshed. You understand the necessity of compromise. I understand transparency. Transparency destabilizes confidence, he said. And confidence is what prevents mass panic. I pulled the drive from my pocket. I don't think obedience and confidence are the same thing. Marcus's gaze dropped briefly to the device in my hand. You won't release that, he said. I already have. His eyes snapped back to mine. I nodded slightly. Independent networks, media outlets, PAC leadership forums, timed release. If anything happens to me, or Orion, the rest goes public automatically. For the first time in a decade, I saw uncertainty flicker across Marcus Vane's face. You're risking structural collapse, he said. No, I replied. You already did that. Footsteps echoed outside. Orion entered slowly, not threatening, just present. Marcus looked at him. You would have torn this region apart, he said to Orion. I wanted answers, Orion replied evenly. And now? Now I want accountability. Marcus turned back to me. You think this ends well? He asked. No, I said honestly. I think it ends honestly. Silence filled the hall. Marcus straightened slightly, reclaiming composure. You've chosen exile, he said. I've chosen daylight. He studied me one last time. I believed in you, he said quietly. I believed in you too. That hurt more than the list. Outside, distant sirens began to rise, not tactical. Media, civil oversight, investigative units responding to a leak they couldn't ignore. Structural confidence was cracking. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When this fractures, he said, remember that instability has consequences. It always did, I replied. He walked past us without resistance. No dramatic arrest, no struggle. Just a man who had believed he was saving the world, and now had to face what saving had cost. The system wouldn't collapse overnight. But it would never be invisible again. And that was enough. Systems don't collapse with explosions. They unravel. The leak moved faster than any internal suppression unit could contain. By nightfall, footage from the facility had hit independent media networks. PAC councils began demanding transparency. Regional leaders publicly denied knowledge. Federal oversight divisions opened inquiries. Tier 3 trended for 48 straight hours. Marcus Vane stepped down pending investigation. He wasn't dragged out in handcuffs. Not immediately. That's not how structures protect themselves. They distance first, condemn quietly, reassign blame. But the word disposal doesn't disappear once people see it. I was placed on administrative suspension within 24 hours. Official wording, breach of operational confidentiality. Unofficial translation, liability. I surrendered my credentials in a neutral office with gray carpet and neutral expressions. No one raised their voice. No one accused me directly. They didn't need to. You understand this is permanent, the compliance officer said gently. Yes, I replied. I left without my badge. Outside, reporters clustered beyond barricades. Questions flew. I didn't answer them. Orion stood across the street, hands in his pockets, watching quietly. Free. No active warrant. No pending Tier 3. The program itself had been frozen pending investigation. He raised an eyebrow slightly when I approached. So, he said. Unemployed. Temporarily reassigned to existential crisis, I corrected. He smiled faintly. Regrets? I thought about Mason. Darla. The empty houses. The white walls. No, I said. He studied me carefully. You lost everything. I looked at him. Not everything. The world didn't heal overnight. Some PACs resisted reform. Some denied the footage entirely. Some claimed it was necessary sacrifice. But conversations were happening now that had never been allowed before. Autonomy. Transparency. Voluntary separation. Return. Redefined. What will you do? Orion asked as we stood there in the open air, no longer monitored. I considered it. I'm good at helping wolves navigate systems, I said. Maybe I start helping them leave those systems. Without chains? Without chains. He nodded once. For the first time since that night on the highway, neither of us was being tracked. The word return had meant containment for most of my career. Now it meant something else. Choice. The house wasn't impressive. 2 bedrooms. A wide porch. Pine trees close enough to muffle the road. Orion insisted on building it himself. Slowly, deliberately, piece by piece. No hierarchy, he told the small group gathered in the yard one evening. No coercion. You stay because you want to. It wasn't a traditional pack. It was smaller. Looser. A beta, who'd refused arranged leadership. An omega who'd left an overbearing council. A young alpha who wanted mentorship without submission rituals. They argued openly. Laughed loudly. Cooked together. No black vans. No midnight relocations. I set up a modest consultancy 3 months after the investigation formally opened. Voluntary exit mediation. The name made some leaders nervous. Good. Wolves came quietly at first. Then, more openly. Some wanted reintegration into different regions. Some wanted full independence. Some just wanted someone to explain their options without threat. I did that. It turns out negotiation works better when it isn't backed by disposal clauses. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Orion sat beside me on the porch steps. You could have built something bigger, he said. I don't need bigger, I replied. He looked at the small cluster of wolves in the yard, arguing over grill techniques. You changed the system, he said. No, I corrected gently. It changed itself once it was seen. He leaned back against the wooden railing. And us? I glanced at him. We're still negotiating. He smiled at that. The air was calm. No pressure, no dominance. Just presence. For the first time in my life, the word return didn't feel like a threat. It felt like home. For the first time, I wasn't returning anyone. I was staying.